Donna Schwartz here. In this video I want to talk to you about how to properly oil valves on a trumpet. Now this could also apply for valves on a tuba or a baritone. The main difference between oiling the valves on a trumpet and the other two instruments is this. On a baritone and on a tuba, on the inside of the valves there's something called a valve guide. It's usually a metal piece that sticks out along the valve, and it lines up with a groove on the inside of the valve casing. That would be true for baritones and tuba. It's also true for some very old brands of trumpet. But most of the modern day trumpets don't have those grooves. Instead, on trumpets, each valve is numbered. So for example, on this trumpet, the valve closest to the mouthpiece is valve number 1. The middle valve is valve number 2. The end valve is valve number 3. And that would be true again on a baritone and on a tuba as well. But like I said, those have grooves. These do not. The numbers matter on the trumpet valves because depending on which way the number is facing, that's the way the valve needs to be lined up. Now let me explain something. If the trumpet, let's say this is my number one trumpet valve, and the number 1 written on the inside of the valve faces towards the mouthpiece. If I don't put the valve in with the number 1 facing the mouthpiece, I'm going to put the trumpet up and I'm going to blow and the air's going to stop. The reason why, the holes of the valve have to line up so when you press it down and you're blowing through the instrument, air will flow through. It won't flow through if the valve is placed in improperly. Okay? So, let me show you how to do this. And actually, let me explain one more thing. A bunch of times, some students have come up to me in the beginning of the year and said, oh, they showed me how to oil my valves in the music store. They said, just take the oil and just shoot it down here, down the holes down here, and then you're good to go. I wince, and then I say, no, that's not correct. If you shoot oil down in the bottom of these valve caps in the holes, all that's going to happen is the oil is going to collect in the bottom valve cap. You turn the horn over, it's all over your pants. Mom's not happy. Okay, it's not easy to get the oil out. All right, so just to let you know, here's the right way to do it. Carefully place the trumpet down. I'm using my lap. You could use a flat surface. Just make sure you put a towel down because you don't want to scratch up the surface of the instrument. I'm going to loosen the first valve. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Okay, remember that. As I'm loosening this up, I'm carefully pulling it out. I'm holding onto the valve stem. The valve stem is the piece over here, the rod type of piece. But as I'm carefully pulling it out, I'm not screwing it around. I want to make sure I pull it out enough so I see where that number of the valve faces. And as I'm looking at it, I see my number 1 that's etched in the valve. It's faced towards the mouthpiece. So my number 1 valve faces towards the mouthpiece. I will tell you that most good brands of trumpets, once you take out this first valve, most of the valves will follow the same numbering system in terms of where the numbers faced. So if number 1 faces towards the mouthpiece, chances are number 2 and 3 will also face towards the mouthpiece. I had one student last year who had a decent brand of trumpet, but I couldn't believe it. Every single valve faced a different way, and the poor kid was so confused oiling his valves. He had to make sure he wrote it down so he remembered how to oil his valves. So I pull out the first valve really carefully. I don't want to touch, any part of the valve because there's all oil all over it, right? So I want to make sure that, I don't get my hands filled with oil. I'm still holding it in the direction of the number 1 facing towards the valve. That's just me. Now, I tend to be pretty meticulous with cleaning my instruments, so you're not going to see the gunk and gook that you would see in the holes of the valve. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a clean rag. I'm going to wipe off the old oil from the valve. I'm just going to place this down on my lap for a second. Now, if you do have gunk and gook on the inside of the valve, there's 2 ways to clean that out. And let me just place this here for 1 second. When I totally clean out my instrument, and I will have a video available of that in the very near future, I use the simple green all-purpose wipes. You can get these online. They're a little hard to get locally. And with these, what I do is I take out one wipe and I go through the holes with the wipe. So let me just show you that. And let me show you the device that I use to do that. These can be a little bit moist. So after you go through the valve, just let it air dry for like maybe a minute or so. This is a cleaning rod. Now this you can also get at some local music stores, but you could also get this online. It's got a long hole over here. This is just, you know, to store it or just put your finger in that to hold it. I take one end of the wipe, you know, a diagonal end, and I push it through the hole, almost like sewing. I don't sew though. You wouldn't want to see me sew. All right, I roll some of the cloth, not a lot of it, just some of the cloth around. So I put the cloth through and I roll it around so that it stays on the rod. I take my valve. I know which direction the valve is going to face. I remember it. And all I do is I go in the holes like this, cleaning it out. And a lot of gook is going to come out. But like I said, I'm very meticulous, so I'm just seeing very little stuff actually. The other thing that I tend to do, I tend to wipe down the valve with the simple green wipe. I like the simple green wipes because, well, they're very earth friendly, but they're also just really good. Okay, and I let that just air dry just for a second. In fact, I'm going to place that on a part of my clean rag. And the next step that I'm going to do, I'm going to get my valve oil. There's many different types of valve oil. I generally recommend for beginners to get Al-Cas, widely available. You can get it in any local music store online. Another good brand that I use is Blue Juice. Again, fairly widely available. You could also definitely get this online. For my professional horns, I use something called Binoc Pro. This you can only get online. And this, you have to use this a certain way. I'll explain that at the end. So I'm going to use my Blue Juice because that's what I tend to use on this trumpet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my oil. Now here's the thing, for beginners, these dispensers, the dispensing of the oil, this is going to shoot out. So you've got to be really careful and really meticulous about this. You don't want to put oil in the holes. That's not going to do anything for you. The oil is supposed to be going on the silver part of the valve because that's what's going to interact with the inside of the valve casing. Okay, now I'm going to say this rule. This is really important. Too much oil is just as bad as too little. Let me say it again. Too much oil is just as bad as too little. Why? There is not much room between the valve and the valve casing. It's like millimeters, if even that. Everything's designed in such a way so the valves move freely. But if you put too much oil in there, that's going to get in the way of the motion of the valve. So here's how I recommend you oil your valve. You may want to do this over a garbage can. I always have my beginners doing that. For now, I just want you to be able to see this. I don't want any other stuff in the way. So I'm going to take my valve oil. I'm going to basically, I don't want to say squirt out, but let out a ring of oil along the top silver part like this. You can barely see it because it's clear oil. I'm going to put another ring down the side like this, and another ring along the bottom. I'm going to put it all along the bottom for this particular horn of mine. Now, I'm looking for the number of the valve. I see number 1. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to carefully place the valve in, and I'm going to move the valve up and down. And if it feels like it's really smooth, easy to move, then I'm going to carefully screw it in. Now, here's the part that people tend to forget. After you've screwed it in, righty-tighty, this upper part, the valve cap, I'm probably calling that wrong right now. I'm having a brain fart. Okay, anyway, this has to lock. You probably can't hear that, but this can't be loose. If it's loose, the valve is moving on the inside. So you want to make sure that it's tight and it's locked. Okay? Let me show you with valve number 2. I carefully pull it out. I look for the number 2. Yep, it's facing the mouthpiece. That's cool. Carefully pull it out. I could use my clean rag and wipe off the old oil. By the way, I just want to mention this. You don't need to put oil on this top part of the valve because that's not what's making contact with the inside of the valve casing. Okay, just to let you know that. I'm going to take my simple green wipe and get a different part of this rag, and I'm just going to go through the holes. If you don't have the simple green wipes, what you can do is you can use Q-tips, but you've got to be really careful, because the thing with the Q-tips is, you know how they, you can get all that Q-tip fuzz. You don't want that white cotton fuzz anywhere like on the outside of the valve, and let me tell you why. Once again, there's very little room between the valve and the valve casing. The cotton fuzz is definitely going to get in the way of the valve, and it's going to prevent it from moving well. It's going to make it sluggish. Alright, so I'm letting this air dry for a little bit as I'm talking to you. Do I see dirt in there? Yes, I do. I missed a spot. Okay, I don't want to gross myself out. So let me do this. Like I mentioned before, I'm pretty meticulous about cleaning, and when I see dirt, I got to get it out, because that's just too gross. There it is. When you're cleaning your instrument, you're going to see all different sorts of shades of colors. It's going to be very exciting. I suggest you don't have dinner anytime after you're cleaning your instrument. Okay, let me let that air dry for a second. While this is air drying, let me also mention one of the main things, how do I put this? One of the main problems that I see is that the top part of this valve gets very loose. You notice what I just did? I just loosened the valve on the top, and what happens is the whole valve falls apart because the top part is not screwed in all the way. So all you need to do is just screw in this part with the valve stem and make sure that it's tight on the top. Okay, so now I'm going to put my ring around the rosy. Now my ring around the top part of the valve over here, not in the holes, again on the solid part. One down the side, one ring around the bottom. Notice you didn't see oil squirting out, okay? That you don't need to do that. I'm going to put it in, move it up and down, and that felt good. And screw it in and lock it in. And press down the valves. That feels really good compared to my third valve. Okay, that's definitely a difference there. So again, same process with the third valve, and I would go through that whole process with you. Now, I'm not going to actually put this Binoc Pro Oil on, but I just want to explain it. The Binoc Pro Oil has a different dispenser, and this type of oil, you need to make sure that the inside of the valve casing is very clean, because this will not interact with any other dirt or oil in there. So what I recommend when I clean my professional trumpet, this is what I do. I actually take out my valve. I'm going to place this on a clean rag right now, and I'm going to wipe off the outside, the oil in the outside. I'm going to take another end of the simple green wipe, wrap it around the cleaning rod. I'm going to go into the third valve casing and clean inside there. And you'll get a wide array of colors coming out there too, okay? Now, I'm going to let that air dry for a couple of seconds. I'm going to wipe off this valve. I'm going to check to see if I need to clean out this. And I'm going to do that for a little bit too. With the Binoc oil, all I would need to do is to put even less oil on the valves. This Binoc oil is so good. It really lubricates the valves really, really well. So, in fact, I will show you that. Okay, let that air dry for a second. That looks pretty clean. Check that one more time. That's better. Okay, let me let that air dry for a second. It's clean on the inside. What I also do when I clean out my trumpet, I take off everything. All right, this is just plumbing. That's all it is. I even take off the valve caps on the bottom. And for some beginner trumpets, these things are stuck. All right, so when you first are renting your instrument, make sure that you can unscrew these bottom valve caps. That's going to be important later on when you're cleaning your instrument. I'm going to use the blue juice on this, but I would do the Binoc oil the same way. One ring around the top, one ring around the bottom. I do a ring down the side, the solid part of the side. Let me just get this off here for a second. I got a little bit of schmutz on. Okay. And I check my number. It's lined up to the mouthpiece. I'm going to move it up and down, and there it is. Now, another thing I'm going to recommend to you too, and I definitely do this with my professional trumpet. It's a lot easier to do with the Binoc Pro Oil. You can put a couple of drops of oil down the main lead pipe. That lubricates the inside of the lead pipe, and you'll be blowing that oil through the horn, so it's going to lubricate other areas of the horn. You could also do that with the blue juice as well. Blue juice, excuse me. You just have to be a little careful because this tends to shoot out a little bit too much. So just one drop, let it run down the lead pipe, and then what I like to do, and this is weird, but this is me, I like to shoot another drop down the top part of the lead pipe, let it run down, and then the next time I blow through it, it'll blow through the horn. Now, one way to test to make sure that you oiled your valves properly, just blow. That should be fine. If I'm able to get a sound from all three valves, I oiled my valves properly. One great way to also check too, after you oil each valve, make sure that you can play a note. If you can't play a note, then you didn't oil that, you didn't put the valve in properly, the number facing the correct way. And that's it. So if you enjoyed this video on oiling your trumpet valves, I have plenty of other videos on my website. Check them out at donnaschwartzmusic.com. Share them, and I also offer online lessons and lesson video packages. On that note, have a great day.